The grand hall of the Zuri Empire stretched wider than the eye could see. Its walls were carved from shining crystal, and tall banners of silver and blue swayed gently in the air. The floor reflected the light of the twin suns outside, making the hall glow like a chamber of stars. On a high throne sat King Vyar, ruler of the Zuri. His crown was not of gold but of woven metal strands that shimmered with power. Around him stood noble advisors, armored guards, and curious onlookers. This was not an ordinary day. A great challenge had been declared. The king had sent word across the galaxy that he sought a protector for his daughter, Princess Auril. Threats were rising on every border, and whispers of war spread from one world to another. The king wanted not just a soldier but a champion, someone who could guard his daughter against any danger that might come. The hall was filled with warriors who had answered the call. They came from many species, each one proud of their strength. There were tall beings with scales like shields, armor giants from the frozen moons, and swift fighters with 4 arms who carried blades in each hand. Their voices thundered as they boasted of their victories. Some claimed they had crushed armies, others said they had defeated monsters, and many spoke of their bloodlines as proof of their worth. The princess sat quietly beside her father. Auril was young, graceful, and thoughtful. Her eyes, bright like clear water, watched the warriors with caution. She had seen many strong figures before, yet something about today made her uneasy. She knew her father would choose carefully, but her heart felt heavy with worry. One by one, the warriors stepped forward, bowing and presenting their strength. Some flexed their massive arms, some showed scars from battles, and others demonstrated their weapons with loud cracks of energy. The hall shook with sound, and the crowd cheered. Then, at the far edge of the hall, another figure walked in. He was not like the others. He did not roar, boast, or strike the ground to demand attention. He walked slowly, his steps steady, his eyes calm. His armor was simple, plain steel marked with the passage of time. His face was quiet, his expression unreadable. He was human. His name was Darren. The crowd turned their heads toward him. Some aliens chuckled at the sight. Compared to the towering warriors, he seemed too ordinary. He carried no glowing weapon, no heavy shield. Only a simple sword hung at his side, worn smooth from years of use. The king leaned forward, curious. "Another challenger?" he asked, his voice echoing through the hall. Darren bowed slightly. "I come to serve," he said simply. The hall erupted with laughter. Some warriors pointed at him, calling him weak. Others shook their heads, saying a human could never match the strength of the galaxy's finest. But Darren did not react. He stood still, as if their words were no more than passing wind. Princess Auril's eyes widened as she looked at him. There was something unsettling in his silence. Every other warrior had filled the hall with their power and pride, yet this one stood without needing any of it. She turned to her father quickly, her voice urgent. "Not him, father," she whispered. "I am afraid of that human warrior." Her words surprised the king. He looked at her, then back at Darren. "Afraid? He has not even spoken a boast." "That is why I fear him," the princess replied softly. "The others shout of their strength, but he says nothing. His eyes carry something different. I cannot explain it, but it makes me uneasy." The king studied the human. Darren stood firm, his gaze steady, neither proud nor ashamed. There was no sign of weakness, yet no sign of arrogance either. He was like a blade sheathed in silence. Around the hall, the other warriors continued to mock him. They struck their weapons on the ground, daring him to prove himself. But Darren did not rise to their calls. He simply waited, his presence unshaken. The king raised his hand, silencing the noise. "Every warrior who comes before this throne must face the test," he declared. "Boasts and scars mean nothing without proof. All who wish to guard my daughter shall show their strength in the trial." The hall cheered, for they knew the trial would separate the true from the false. The warriors readied themselves, eager to prove their might. Darren gave a single nod, showing no fear. The princess, however, kept her eyes on him. Her heart beat faster, and she felt a chill despite the warmth of the suns. She could not understand why the human unsettled her so deeply. Perhaps it was because he looked at no one with anger, yet carried an air of quiet danger. Perhaps it was because he seemed like a man who would not stop once he chose his path. Whatever the reason, she gripped her father's hand tightly and repeated, "Not him, father. Please, not him." But the king only gave a thoughtful look. "We shall see, Arl. The trial will decide." The drums of the court began to sound, their deep rhythm filling the hall. The warriors prepared to show their power. Some roared with excitement, others sharpened their blades, and the crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Darren stood among them, silent and steady, his eyes calm like still water before a storm. The drums faded, but the echo of their sound still lingered in the vast hall of the Zuri Empire. Warriors prepared themselves for the trial, each one eager to prove their worth before the throne. The princess, however, sat still, her gaze fixed upon the human who stood among them. Darren had spoken only once, his voice steady and plain. That short moment had unsettled her more than all the roars and boasts of the other warriors. The others had shouted of their victories, but this one spoke as if he needed no approval. He stood without fear, and that silence felt heavier than any weapon. Princess Arl leaned closer to her father again. Her voice was low, but filled with urgency. "Father, I do not trust him. Something about the human is wrong. He does not act like the others. He hides his strength in silence. It feels dangerous." King Vyar turned his head and studied her face. The concern in her eyes was real, but he was not quick to dismiss the human. The king had ruled for many years and had seen countless warriors. He knew that the loudest were often the weakest, and that true power did not always shine with noise. "My daughter," the king said in a calm tone, "fear is not always a sign of danger. Sometimes fear warns us of greatness too. You must learn to look beyond the surface." Arl pressed her lips together. She wanted to argue, but her father's words held weight. Still, she could not shake the unease in her chest. She looked back at the human. Darren stood with his hands resting on the hilt of his sword, not gripping it tightly, but simply as if it were part of him. His eyes did not wander, nor did they challenge. They simply observed, calm and unreadable. The trial began with a roar. The first warrior, a scaled beast of a man, stepped forward into the circle. He raised a massive hammer and slammed it against the floor, cracking the stone. The crowd cheered as he swung the hammer in great arcs, showing strength beyond imagination. The air shook with each strike. The second challenger, a swift fighter with 4 arms, followed next. He spun his blades so fast that they became streaks of light. He leapt high, landed with precision, and slashed the air in perfect patterns. The audience clapped in rhythm, impressed by the display of skill. More warriors stepped forward one after another. Some breathed fire, others bent energy into shields, and a few broke heavy stones with their bare fists. Each one tried to outshine the others, desperate to win the king's approval. Through it all, Darren did not move. He did not clap or shake his head. He simply watched. His calmness made Arl's unease grow. The silence around him felt louder than the roars of the warriors. When the last of the warriors finished, the king raised his hand. "You have shown your strength," he declared. "But words and demonstrations are not enough. True strength reveals itself when tested. Each of you will face a trial in combat. You will not fight to destroy, but to prove your worth." The crowd cheered louder than before. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Real combat, not just display. The warriors stood straighter, eager to step into the circle. The king pointed to the scaled warrior. "You first." The trial began. The scaled warrior faced one of the palace guards chosen as a challenger. The guard was skilled, but the warrior's power was overwhelming. With 3 strikes of his hammer, the guard was forced to yield. The audience clapped, praising the warrior's might. One by one, the other champions entered the circle. Some fought with precision, others with raw strength. Victories and defeats followed, but the true test was not of blood. It was of control, discipline, and the ability to guard without destruction. Finally, the king's gaze fell upon the human. "Darren," he said, his voice steady. "Step forward." The hall grew quiet. For the first time, Darren moved. His steps were slow but certain. He entered the circle and stood ready. He drew his sword, not with a show of power, but with simple grace. His opponent was a tall warrior covered in thick armor, chosen from the palace guard. The armored fighter raised his spear and pointed it at the human, confident in his strength. "Begin," the king commanded. The armored fighter lunged forward, spear aimed for the human's chest. Darren shifted slightly, his sword flashing in a short, clean arc. The spear was deflected, and before the fighter could recover, the tip of Darren's blade rested gently against the guard's neck. The match ended in a single breath. The hall gasped. The armored fighter stepped back, shocked but unharmed. Darren lowered his sword and bowed slightly. He had not hurt his opponent. He had not boasted. He had simply shown his skill with perfect control. The crowd erupted into whispers. Some were impressed, others doubted what they had seen. How could a fight end so quickly, so quietly? Princess Arl's heart raced. She gripped her chair tightly. She wanted to look away, but her eyes remained locked on the human. His movements had been so precise, so calm, that she could not understand how he had done it. There had been no wasted motion, no unnecessary display. He had moved like water flowing around stone. "Do you see now, Arl?" the king asked quietly. "The human does not boast because he does not need to. His strength is in his silence, in his control." But Arl shook her head. "That is what makes him more frightening, father. The others show their power for all to see. He hides it until the moment he strikes. How can I trust someone who keeps his strength hidden like that?" The king leaned back on his throne, thoughtful. "Perhaps you are right to be cautious. Trust is not earned in a single moment. But fear alone cannot guide us. Sometimes, the ones we fear are the very ones who protect us best." Arl said nothing more, but her heart was restless. She looked at Darren again. He stood quietly in the circle, his sword sheathed once more, his eyes calm. The other warriors glared at him with envy, but he seemed not to notice. To the princess, he was like a shadow she could not escape. Silent, steady, and always present. and that silence frightened her more than any roar of strength. The great hall of the Zuri Empire was silent, except for the soft footfalls of the warriors moving into position. The trial of strength had begun in earnest, and the eyes of the entire court were fixed on the circle at the center. Princess Arl's heartbeat was fast, her hands gripping the armrest of her seat. The human warrior, Darren, stood calmly at the edge of the circle, his sword at his side. The first trial was not just about power. The king had made it clear that the challenge was to test not only strength but wisdom, control, and the ability to protect rather than destroy. Every warrior who stepped forward knew that this was their chance to prove themselves worthy of guarding the princess. A large alien fighter named Gorath, covered in thick metallic scales, stepped into the circle first. He carried a massive hammer that glowed faintly with energy. The crowd cheered, anticipating a show of raw force. Gorath swung the hammer with all his might, crushing the stones in the circle and sending sparks into the air. Darren watched silently from the side, his eyes following every movement. He did not speak or react. He simply observed the swing, the angle of the hammer, and the stance of Gorath. Gorath's opponent, a palace guard of average strength, tried to respond. He blocked the first strike, then stumbled under the sheer weight of the hammer. Each movement of Gorath was loud and violent, meant to overwhelm the opponent. In contrast, Darren's calm observation seemed out of place. The trial continued with other warriors, each demonstrating impressive displays of skill. Some twisted the air into sharp currents, others leapt high and spun with multiple weapons at once. The audience clapped and cheered, dazzled by the spectacle. Yet Darren remained still, his presence quiet, almost invisible. When it was finally his turn, a hush fell over the hall. The court had watched the human stand silently, waiting. Some whispered to each other, skeptical of his ability. Others stared with a mixture of curiosity and fear. The king spoke, his voice echoing clearly through the hall. Darren, step into the circle and show us your skill. Darren stepped forward with measured steps. He did not rush or show signs of tension. The warriors who had gone before him had moved with speed and loud display. Darren moved like a shadow, smooth and controlled, his sword swinging lightly at his side. His opponent was a tall and muscular alien warrior named Thorun. Thorun had defeated many challengers with sheer force. He carried a spear nearly as tall as himself. His expression was confident, almost mocking, as he faced the human. The king gave the signal. Begin. Thorun lunged with a heavy thrust of his spear. Darren shifted his weight, dodging effortlessly. Every movement was precise, deliberate, and calculated. He did not strike with unnecessary force. He blocked, deflected, and moved with careful attention to Thorun's rhythm. The crowd gasped as Darren's skill became apparent. He moved faster than the eye could follow, yet each motion was calm and controlled. He avoided unnecessary strikes, focusing only on defense and balance. Every time Thorun attacked, Darren met the movement with perfect timing, redirecting force rather than clashing against it. Princess Arl's heart raced. She had seen skilled fighters before, but this human's ability was unlike anything she had witnessed. There was no arrogance, no display. He fought not to show off but to protect himself and, potentially, others. That thought unsettled her even more. The trial continued for several minutes. Thorun grew frustrated. He could not land a decisive hit, while Darren maintained perfect control. The other warriors and spectators leaned forward, watching the match with wide eyes. Even some of the doubting nobles began to whisper in admiration. Finally, Darren acted. With a swift, controlled movement, he disarmed Thurin without causing harm. The spear flew through the air, landing harmlessly to the side. Darren stepped back, sword lowered, and nodded respectfully to his opponent. The hall fell silent for a moment. Then the crowd erupted into applause. Some were cheering loudly, others murmured in disbelief. The human had defeated one of the strongest warriors not through power alone but through control, skill, and precision. Princess Arl felt a chill in her chest. She wanted to step forward and speak to her father, but her lips remained pressed together. The human's calm strength frightened her more than the loud demonstrations of others. She had expected boisterous displays, yet Darren's quiet mastery was different. It seemed deeper, more certain, and unyielding. King Vyar studied the human carefully. He had seen many warriors come and go, but Darren's approach was unique. The king spoke, his voice firm. The human demonstrates not only strength but discipline, control, and wisdom. These are the qualities of a true guardian. Do not be misled by noise or size. Arl looked at her father, her eyes wide. But father, she said softly, he hides his strength until the moment it is needed. How can we trust someone who keeps their power in shadow? The king's expression was serious but kind. Trust is built over time. Sometimes, the strongest protectors are not those who shout the loudest. Sometimes, they are those who wait, observe, and act when it is most necessary. Despite his words, the princess could not shake her unease. She looked at Darren, now standing quietly at the edge of the circle. His sword hung at his side, and he appeared calm, almost casual. There was a weight to his presence, a quiet certainty that made her heart beat faster. The trial moved to the next stage, which involved teamwork and strategy. Warriors were paired to complete challenges requiring coordination and foresight. Darren's partner was a small but clever alien named Rilo. Together, they faced a series of obstacles designed to test planning and agility. Where others rushed and shouted commands, Darren listened. He moved deliberately, adjusting Rilo's movements and guiding him without forceful orders. Their coordination was seamless. The other teams struggled to communicate, while Darren and Rilo completed the challenges with speed and precision. By the end of the trial, Darren had not only proven his skill in combat but also his ability to lead, protect, and remain calm under pressure. The other warriors looked at him with respect and some with envy. Princess Arl's eyes stayed fixed on him. She could no longer deny his talent, but the quiet certainty of his presence still frightened her. She realized that this human was not like the others. He carried a strength that did not need display, a discipline that did not need applause, and a focus that did not waver. King Vyar smiled slightly. This trial is complete. Darren has shown the qualities of a true protector. The choice is not made lightly, but he has earned the right to guard my daughter. Even if fear lingers, wisdom recognizes value when it appears. The princess remained silent, torn between awe and apprehension. She understood that Darren's abilities were extraordinary, yet the shadow of fear still clung to her heart. Darren, however, did not seek praise. He simply nodded to the king and the princess, standing ready to serve if called upon. His quiet confidence and mastery left a mark on everyone in the hall. Even those who doubted could not ignore the truth of his strength. Princess Arl looked at him one last time before leaving the circle. She knew that the human warrior was different from all others, and she would have to decide whether to trust him in the trials that were yet to come. The palace of the Zuri Empire was vast and magnificent, with corridors that stretched farther than the eye could see. The walls were lined with glowing crystals that pulsed gently with light, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Princess Arl walked through the hallways with her guards nearby, though her heart felt uneasy. Even after the trials in the Great Hall, the memory of the human warrior, Darren, lingered in her mind. She had watched him during the tests, his calm presence and controlled movements. He had not boasted or shouted. He had only acted when necessary, and yet every motion of his had shown power far beyond what she had expected from a human. The way he moved quietly but decisively made her uneasy. She could not deny his skill, but she did not yet trust him. That night, the palace seemed unusually quiet. The usual hum of servants and guards had dimmed, leaving a stillness that pressed against the princess. She could hear her own footsteps echoing along the long corridor as she returned to her chambers. Meanwhile, Darren had been assigned to patrol the outer halls. He walked silently, sword at his side, eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of threat. Unlike the other guards, who relied on strength and numbers, Darren's method was careful observation. He noticed details others would miss: a shadow moving too quickly, a whisper in the wind, the faintest shift of a crystal light along the walls. As Princess Arl reached her room, a sudden noise made her freeze. A soft click echoed from the far end of the corridor, followed by the subtle scrape of a foot against the stone floor. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart racing. Her guards had not noticed, distracted by their own conversations. Darren, who was passing nearby, sensed something wrong immediately. He moved without sound, stepping into the shadows and following the faint trace of movement. His eyes caught the reflection of a small device, the kind used for silent entry. Someone was inside the palace, moving toward the princess's chambers. Arl tried to steady her breathing, but fear made it difficult. She thought of the human warrior and wondered if he would arrive in time. She had not yet learned to trust him fully, yet somehow she felt a strange reassurance knowing he was nearby. The intruder stepped into the corridor, cloaked in dark fabric and moving carefully. Darren observed silently from the shadows. He noted the intruder's movements, predicting each step. Then, in a single fluid motion, he stepped out, placing himself directly between the intruder and the princess. The figure froze, realizing the path forward was blocked. Darren's presence alone was commanding. He did not shout or threaten, but the calm certainty in his posture was enough to make the intruder hesitate. "Leave this place," Darren said firmly. His voice was low but carried unmistakable authority. The intruder lunged forward, attempting to strike. Darren moved faster than the eye could follow, deflecting the attack with a simple, precise motion. The intruder stumbled back, surprised by the speed and control of the human. Darren's sword did not harm the attacker, but it blocked every strike with perfect timing. Princess Arl watched from the doorway, wide-eyed. She had never seen anyone move like this before. Every action Darren took was calm, controlled, and deliberate. He did not rely on force alone. He used strategy, anticipation, and precision. The intruder realized that brute force would not succeed and tried a different approach. He darted toward the side corridor, hoping to reach the princess before Darren could respond. But Darren had already anticipated the move. With swift, silent steps, he intercepted the intruder, guiding him toward a corner and disarming him without causing injury. The intruder struggled briefly but was no match for Darren's skill. Within moments, he was subdued, bound, and placed under guard. The human did not look triumphant. He simply adjusted his stance, eyes still scanning the hall for any other threat. Princess Arl stepped forward cautiously, her fear mixed with awe. You stopped him," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Darren turned his head and nodded. He would have reached you if I had not acted. The palace is not as safe as it seems. You must always remain alert. The princess realized that the danger she had feared could have been real. Her heart had raced not from imagination but from the presence of someone who intended harm. Yet the human warrior had stopped it quietly, efficiently, without chaos or alarm. Her guards arrived shortly after, faces pale with surprise. "What happened?" one of them asked, looking at the bound intruder. Darren explained briefly, his tone calm. He did not boast. He did not exaggerate. He simply described the intruder's actions and the potential threat. The guards listened, wide-eyed, understanding for the first time that this human's ability went far beyond what they had imagined. Princess Arl could not look away from Darren. The fear she had felt in the Great Hall was different now. She understood that he was dangerous not because of cruelty or anger but because of his strength, precision, and intelligence. He was a protector who could act when others could not. "Why are you so calm?" she asked softly, stepping closer. "Even when he came for me, you did not panic." Darren looked at her, his expression steady. "Panic does not protect anyone. Observation, preparation, and action protect. Fear can guide, but it cannot control me." The princess considered his words. They were simple but carried a weight she could feel in her chest. She realized that the human warrior was not just skilled with a sword. He understood people, danger, and the value of careful thought. He did not need to shout to command respect because his presence alone demanded it. That night, as the palace returned to its quiet state, Princess Arl could not sleep. She kept thinking about the human who had saved her. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had changed. It was no longer the fear of an unknown threat but the fear of someone so capable that she could not fully measure his power. Darren continued his patrols, moving silently through the halls. Every shadow, every sound, every subtle movement was observed. The palace had never felt safer, yet it had never felt more fragile. The princess watched him from her window as he passed through the corridors, a figure of quiet strength and calm authority. She realized something important that night. The human warrior's power was not loud or showy, but it was unmatched. She understood that true strength was not measured by noise or size but by control, observation, and the ability to act when it mattered most. Princess Arl's fear did not disappear entirely, but it was tempered by understanding. She knew that if she were to survive the challenges ahead, she would have to accept the protection of the human warrior, even if his presence still made her uneasy. The palace lay quiet under the twin moons, yet the shadow of danger had passed. For the first time, Princess Arl felt a flicker of hope, knowing that Darren was watching over her, silently, yet with unmatched skill. The morning sun bathed the Zuri palace in golden light, yet the atmosphere inside was tense. Whispers of the previous night's intrusion had spread through the corridors like wildfire. The bound intruder had been questioned, and though he revealed little, it was clear that forces beyond the palace walls were plotting against Princess Arl. The king called an urgent meeting in the War Council chamber. Advisors, generals, and senior guards gathered around the long crystal table. Princess Arl sat beside her father, her eyes scanning the room. She still felt a mix of fear and curiosity whenever she looked at Darren, who had been summoned to stand near the council. One of the senior advisors spoke first. "Your Majesty, it appears the enemy is more organized than we imagined." The intruder was not alone. Scouts report unusual movements near the outer borders. There may be spies within the palace itself. King Vyar frowned. "We have long relied on our guards, but this is different. The attackers are clever and patient. We cannot rely solely on strength. We need vigilance and strategy. Princess Arl's eyes flicked to Darren. He stood silently, observing everything with calm precision. His presence was a quiet contrast to the panic that had begun to stir among the council members. One general spoke up, his voice harsh. "Your Majesty, if I may, the human warrior seems capable, but one man cannot protect the princess from an entire hidden force. We need more soldiers, more traps, more defenses." Darren stepped forward, his movements measured. "Strength alone will not stop those who hide in shadows," he said. "The enemy relies on surprise, secrecy, and timing. Anticipation and careful observation are just as important as numbers. I will patrol and investigate the palace. I will detect threats before they reach the princess." The council murmured among themselves. Some were skeptical of his confidence, while others watched silently, impressed. The king's gaze remained fixed on Darren. He could sense the human's ability to remain calm and focused under pressure, a quality rare among warriors of any species. "Very well," the king said at last. "You may act as you see fit. Protect the princess and uncover any hidden threat. Failure is not an option." Darren inclined his head and left the chamber, moving with quiet purpose through the palace corridors. Princess Arl followed, her curiosity stronger than her fear. She wanted to understand why this human seemed different from all others. As they walked, Darren explained his method. "The enemy works in shadows. They rely on what is not seen. Guards can be distracted or deceived. I watch the details others overlook, unusual movements, out-of-place objects, changes in the environment. These tell me when danger approaches." Arl listened carefully, her fear slowly shifting to respect. "You notice things others cannot," she said. "That is why you could stop the intruder last night." Darren nodded. "Yes. Observation is a weapon. Silence is a shield. Quick, decisive action completes the protection. Strength alone is rarely enough to save someone." They reached the outer hallway near the princess's quarters. Darren paused, lowering his voice. "There is something unusual here. Shadows are not behaving as expected. Someone may be hiding, watching." Arl's pulse quickened. "How do you know?" Darren pointed to subtle marks along the walls, slight disturbances in the light, and tiny footprints near the crystal windows. "These details are small, but they tell a story. Someone has passed through this corridor recently. They may be waiting to act when the palace is less guarded." Arl swallowed hard. "Then we must stop them before they reach anyone." Darren gave her a reassuring nod. "I will handle this. You remain here, safe. You must not be distracted by fear or curiosity. That is how danger finds its way in." He moved silently, blending with the shadows, scanning the area with sharp attention. Moments later, he detected movement, a slight ripple in the air near the stairwell. A figure dressed in dark clothing had hidden among the statues, waiting to advance. Darren acted immediately. He stepped into view, sword drawn. The intruder froze, realizing the human had anticipated the attack. Without a sound, Darren disarmed the figure and held him in place. The intruder struggled but was no match for Darren's control. Arl watched from behind a pillar, her eyes wide. She had never seen such skill, such calm decisiveness. The intruder had entered the palace quietly, yet Darren had noticed every detail. His patience and observation had turned what could have been a disaster into a simple capture. "Who sent you?" Darren asked the intruder. The figure did not answer, only struggling weakly. Darren's eyes narrowed. Silence will not protect you. If you cooperate, this will be easier. If not, you will face consequences. At that moment, palace guards arrived, alerted by the quiet signals Darren had used to call them. The intruder was secured and taken for questioning. Darren remained by the princess, ensuring no other threats were near. Arl approached him slowly, her fear mixed with newfound understanding. You stopped him before anyone else even noticed. I can see why father trusts you. Darren shook his head slightly. Trust is earned, not given. My skill protects, but awareness and preparation are what keep people safe. You must also remain alert, princess. Fear can be useful if it guides you to caution, but it must not control your actions. The princess considered his words. She realized that Darren's power was not only in his sword or strength but in his mind. His calm observation, his ability to predict danger, and his precise actions were what made him so effective. He was not just a warrior, he was a guardian who could see threats before they arrived. Later that evening, the king convened another council. Reports from the outer borders confirmed unusual activity. The enemy forces were growing bolder, but Darren's patrols had already uncovered several hidden spies. The council began to understand the value of his methods. Strength alone would not protect the empire. Strategy, awareness, and timing were equally important. Princess Arl watched from her seat, her fear now tempered by understanding. She still felt a shadow of unease whenever she looked at Darren, but it was no longer fear alone. It was respect, mixed with awe. The human warrior was unlike any protector she had imagined. He did not need to display power to command respect. His quiet strength, patience, and intelligence spoke louder than any shout or strike. As night fell over the palace, Arl realized that the hidden enemy was only the beginning. Greater challenges lay ahead, and she would need to trust Darren more than she wanted to admit. His presence was both unsettling and reassuring. He had proven that even in the shadows, the human warrior was always watching, always ready. Princess Arl finally understood that true protection came not from noise or display but from patience, skill, and unwavering focus. And in Darren, she saw all of these qualities, more than in any other warrior she had met. The day dawned with a pale light over the Zuri palace, but there was no peace in the air. Scouts reported that enemy forces were approaching, stronger and faster than expected. King Vyar called his generals to the war chamber. Guards sharpened their blades and checked their armor. Princess Arl watched silently, her heart heavy with concern. She had seen Darren's skill, but the thought of an entire army reaching the palace made even her confidence falter. Darren moved through the corridors with calm purpose, observing, planning, and preparing. His presence was quiet, but every guard and servant in the palace felt safer with him near. He had already uncovered spies and prevented attacks in the shadows, but now the threat was different. This was no single intruder. This was a force determined to strike the princess. The first signs of the enemy appeared as small units approaching the outer gates. They were swift, armored warriors from a rival empire known for cunning and aggression. Darren stood near the gates, assessing their formation. He did not panic or shout commands. He simply studied the troops, noticing their patterns, their weaknesses, and the possible paths they could take. Princess Arl watched from the balcony above, holding tightly to the railing. She had followed Darren's actions closely, trying to understand his calm focus. He was human, she reminded herself, yet his movements were precise, controlled, and full of quiet authority. The enemy forces advanced steadily. Some attempted to scale the walls, others approached through the main gates. The palace guards responded, but their strength alone was not enough to repel the attackers. Chaos began to stir, and the sound of clashing metal filled the air. Darren moved into the front line without hesitation. He positioned himself strategically between the enemy and the princess, his sword ready. He did not rely on brute force alone. Instead, he guided the palace guards, directing them to hold positions, to anticipate attacks, and to protect the most vulnerable areas. His orders were calm and precise. The guards obeyed without question, recognizing the wisdom in his leadership. The first wave of attackers reached the walls. They tried to push through the gates, using heavy shields and brute strength. Darren met them with skill, deflecting strikes and creating openings for the guards to counterattack. He moved through the battlefield like water flowing around stone, calm but unstoppable. Princess Arl could not tear her eyes away. She had feared this human once, yet now she saw him in a new light. He was not just a fighter. He was a shield, a guide, and a strategist. His presence gave strength to the guards, courage to the palace, and hope to her heart. One of the enemy warriors tried to rush past Darren to reach the princess. He was fast and strong, confident in his abilities. Darren did not panic. He sidestepped, blocked the strike, and used the warrior's momentum to send him tumbling harmlessly to the ground. His movements were efficient and precise, leaving no room for error. Arl felt her fear mix with awe. She had never imagined that one human could face so many opponents without faltering. Each time an enemy attempted to break through, Darren was there, guiding the guards, blocking attacks, and striking only when necessary. He did not seek to destroy. He sought to protect. The palace walls shook as the enemy pressed forward, but Darren remained steady. He moved between the princess and the attackers, positioning himself as a human shield when needed. Every time danger approached, he reacted instantly, using skill, speed, and strategy to neutralize the threat. The other warriors and palace guards began to notice the pattern. Where chaos had once threatened, order now emerged. Darren's calm leadership allowed the defenders to anticipate attacks, move efficiently, and protect key points of the palace. The enemy forces grew frustrated, realizing that brute strength alone could not overcome the human warrior. Princess Arl's heart pounded as she watched him. She had feared him once, but that fear had changed. She now understood the meaning of true strength. It was not loud or boastful. It was quiet, disciplined, and focused. Darren did not fight for glory. He fought to protect, and his every action spoke of unwavering dedication. As the battle continued, Darren spotted a group of enemy archers attempting to climb the palace walls from a hidden path. He moved quickly, signaling the guards to intercept. Using a combination of skill and strategy, he blocked the archers' path, preventing them from reaching the princess. His timing was perfect, his movements precise, and his focus unshakable. The enemy grew desperate. They had expected to overwhelm the palace, but Darren had turned the tide with careful observation and decisive action. The guards, inspired by his calm, followed his lead. Together, they formed a strong line of defense that the attackers could not break. Princess Arl could no longer deny the human's importance. His presence had saved countless lives, not through reckless strength but through intelligence, skill, and courage. She realized that she could rely on him, that his calm and precise nature was exactly what the palace needed. When the final wave of attackers was driven back, the hallways and gates were quiet once more. Darren stood among the guards, sword lowered, his expression calm as if nothing had happened. The palace had survived, the princess was safe, and the enemy forces had been repelled. The king arrived, surveying the battlefield. He saw the human warrior standing tall among the defenders. His face reflected both relief and respect. "Darren," he said, his voice strong, "your skill and calm have saved the palace. You have proven yourself not only a warrior but a guardian. You are more than capable of protecting the princess." Princess Arl stepped forward, her fear replaced by understanding. She looked at Darren with new respect. "You protected us all," she said softly. I see now why father trusts you." Darren nodded, his expression unchanged. "My duty is to protect. I do not seek praise. The palace and the people are safe, and that is enough. Strength alone does not win battles. Observation, preparation, and action do." The princess realized the truth in his words. The human warrior's power was not in how loudly he fought, but in how calmly he stood against overwhelming danger. He had become the shield of the palace, the protector of the princess, and the leader the guards needed in the darkest hour. That evening, as the palace quieted under the twin moons, Princess Arl understood something important. The human warrior's presence was both intimidating and comforting. He was not merely a fighter. He was a guardian who could face any danger, calm and steady, and protect those who could not protect themselves. For the first time, fear did not dominate her thoughts. Instead, she felt a quiet confidence, knowing that Darren would stand between her and any danger, unwavering, precise, and strong. The battle had ended, but the palace of the Zuri Empire still bore the marks of the struggle. The outer gates were damaged, scorch marks lined the walls, and debris from broken shields and weapons littered the courtyard. Guards moved carefully through the halls, repairing damages and checking for any remaining threats. Yet, despite the destruction, there was a sense of calm and relief. The princess was safe, the enemy had been repelled, and the human warrior, Darren, stood among the defenders, silent and watchful. Princess Arl walked through the courtyard, her eyes taking in the aftermath of the attack. She could feel the tension of the day beginning to fade, replaced by a mix of exhaustion and contemplation. She had watched Darren throughout the battle, and her fear of him had gradually shifted into respect. Still, she had questions that demanded answers. She found him standing near the palace gates, sword sheathed, eyes scanning the horizon. His posture was relaxed but ready, a combination of calm strength and alertness. She approached him carefully, unsure of how to begin, but compelled by curiosity and admiration. "You were remarkable today," she said softly. "I saw how you guided the guards, anticipated every move of the enemy, and protected everyone. I do not understand how you do it." Darren turned his head to look at her. His expression was steady and calm, as it always was. "I do what is necessary," he said simply. "I observe, I prepare, and I act when it matters. Strength is only useful when it is guided by thought and discipline." Arl nodded slowly, trying to absorb his words. She remembered the fear she had felt when she first saw him in the grand hall. At the time, his quiet presence had unsettled her. He had seemed unpredictable, almost dangerous in his calmness. Yet now, after seeing him in action, she realized that his strength was not reckless or frightening. It was controlled, precise, and dedicated entirely to protection. "Why do you protect me so willingly?" she asked, her voice quiet. "You do not know me well, and yet you risk yourself to keep me safe." Darren's eyes met hers. "Humans protect those they are entrusted with," he said. It is not about knowing someone well or expecting reward. It is about responsibility. When someone's safety is entrusted to you, it is your duty to act, no matter the cost. Arl felt a lump in her throat. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight she could feel in her chest. She had met many warriors before, all boastful and proud. None had shown her the quiet, unwavering dedication that this human possessed. "You do not boast or seek praise," she said. "You act, and that is all. Yet your presence changes everything. The palace, the guards, and even me. I feel safer with you here." Darren inclined his head slightly. Safety is not given by force alone. It comes from understanding, planning, and readiness. Fear is a tool if used wisely. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. The princess took a deep breath. She remembered the trials in the Great Hall, the intruders in the shadows, and the battle at the gates. Each time, Darren had acted with skill and calm precision. Each time, he had protected her and the palace without fail. She realized now that her fear of him had been misplaced. He was not someone to fear, but someone to trust, someone whose strength inspired confidence rather than dread. "Do you ever rest?" she asked, a small smile forming on her lips. "You move so quietly and act so efficiently. How do you do all of this without tiring?" Darren allowed a faint smile, the first she had seen from him. "Preparation and discipline make the difference. Rest is important, but focus and awareness keep me ready. When duty calls, one must rise above fatigue and act. That is how protection works." Princess Arl looked at him, admiration growing in her heart. "I understand now," she said softly. "The thing that frightened me before was not you. It was the certainty of your skill and the quiet way you wield it. You are different from anyone I have ever met." Darren nodded. "Different does not mean dangerous. It means capable. My skill is only a tool. The choice to use it wisely is what matters." The princess realized that this was the truth of the human warrior. His strength was not for display or pride. It existed solely to protect, to observe, and to act when necessary. He was a shield, not a weapon. He had risked himself countless times to keep others safe, and he did so without hesitation or complaint. She felt a wave of relief wash over her. Her fear had been replaced by understanding and respect. She could finally see the human warrior clearly, not as a figure of fear, but as a guardian. The uncertainty she had carried for so long was gone, replaced by trust. "Thank you, Darren," she said sincerely. "For everything. For stopping the intruders, for guiding the guards, and for protecting me. I think I understand now what it means to have a true protector." Darren's expression remained calm, but there was a softness in his eyes. "It is my duty," he said simply. "You do not need to thank me. Protection is not measured by gratitude, but by action. When someone is entrusted to me, my responsibility is clear. I act, and that is enough." Princess Arl nodded. She felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The human warrior had not only proven his strength but also his heart, his discipline, and his unwavering dedication. He had shown her that true power was not measured by noise or display, but by quiet skill and steadfast loyalty. The sun began to set over the palace, casting long shadows across the courtyard. The battle was over, the intruders had been defeated, and the palace stood safe. Yet Princess Arl knew that the lessons she had learned from Darren would remain with her forever. She looked at him one last time and said, "I was afraid of you once, but now I see the truth. You are not someone to fear. You are someone to trust, someone who protects not for glory, but because it is right. That is the greatest strength of all." Darren bowed slightly, his calm demeanor unchanged. "Your understanding is what matters most. Fear is natural, but wisdom guides courage. Protection is only meaningful when it is done with care, skill, and dedication. That is the way of a true guardian." Princess Arl smiled softly. For the first time since the trials began, she felt completely safe. She understood the warrior's truth. His strength, his calm, and his unwavering dedication were a shield for all, and she knew that with him by her side, nothing could harm her or the palace. As night fell, the palace lay quiet and secure under the twin moons. Darren stood watch, vigilant and steady. Princess Arl returned to her chambers with a new sense of trust, respect, and hope. She had faced fear, observed courage, and finally understood the warrior's truth. Darren was not only strong. He was disciplined, observant, and loyal. He was the shield of the palace, the guardian of the princess, and the human whose quiet strength would always stand between danger and those in need.